sort of big change that I'm talking about is the sort of beginning of multicultural and multiracial Britain. And today's story, Samuel Selwyn's Knock on Wood, really talks about, it really captures this very, very culturally significant moment. Although, the story is about a very, very peculiar character. And yeah, it is as strange as the last week's main character. But in a sense, this story really talks about the really sort of important historical and cultural moment that I am talking about. And in what way is it so important and such a kind of deciding turning point? Today's presenters would explain both by providing the historical information as well as by reading the story. And today we have 5 presenters. Wilson. Okay, hello. And Fiona. Hello. And Alexis. Hello. And Melanie. Okay. And Sherry. Okay, good. And can you start with your presentation? Don't be nervous. Things should be fine. Your PPT is pretty good.
Good evening, everyone. I am Alexis, and our group is presenting week 7 of the book Knock on Wood by Samuel Selwyn. So before I get into the authors, I will be going over the table of contents and who did what. So I did the author portion, also did the introduction and the summary, and the discussion questions were done by Emily, Fiona, and Sherry. The author, Samuel Selwyn, he was an Indo-Trinidadian man, but both of his parents are of Indian descent, I believe, but they all immigrated to Canada. So, Samuel Selwyn was born on May 20, 1923 in San Fernando, Trinidad and Tobago. Growing up in a Creole-speaking household during the 1930s, he experienced the diverse cultural influences of the Caribbean.
Okay, sorry to interrupt you. Yeah, diverse cultural influences in the Caribbean. And this includes his sort of racial background. As you said, he is actually, his parents are both Indians.
Yes.
And what's the connection between the Caribbean and India?
They immigrated there?
They immigrated there. And actually in some of the Caribbean countries, people of Indian descent have actually quite a substantial portion of the historical background. That people migrated from all the way from India to Caribbean.
So I'm not sure about like the group in general, but in the case of his parents, I do believe it had some things to do with their religion, like the undertone of their religion, because the dad, he was like of an Indian religion, and then the mom was a Christian. And I think at the time that wasn't okay to mix.
Okay. But I think one of the factors that sort of prompted them to immigrate to Caribbean is that already there was a kind of certain size of Indian community, particularly in Trinidad and Tobago. Why were they Indians there?
I am not sure.
Okay, so this is where we need to learn a lot of history. Of course, Trinidad and Tobago was one of the British colonies, although there was a time when it was actually a Spanish colony. But why did Britain want not only Trinidad and Tobago, but also other Caribbean islands? You think about it. Britain, Caribbean, it's very far. And actually it was not only Britain, but also other countries such as France, Spain, actually competed to get those small islands. Wow. We have to go back to high school to learn about the world history.
To have access to the
We are talking about 18th century, 17th century, 18th century, 19th century.
the 19 locations during the wars.
That location, yeah, look, it was something to do with location. And these Caribbean islands were very hot, as you could see. And they wanted to have these islands in order to produce what? That could be available only in tropical areas. Rice, lamb, rubber, no, sugar. Right? When people started to have tea and coffee, they wanted to make it sweet. And these islands were very suitable to grow sugarcane, just like Thailand. And that's why these European countries compete each other to get these islands. Okay, and in the beginning of this sugar plantation, who grew sugar? Alright, so Trinidad, they got it, Britain got Trinidad and Tobago, and they said, okay, let's grow sugarcane. And of course, in order to grow sugarcane, they need workforce, laborers. Who would grow sugarcane? Hello? In order to do that big plantation, they need workers. And where did these workers come from, or almost sort of imported?
The other British colonies.
Okay, that comes later. But at the very beginning, because yeah, you can easily imagine sugarcane needs a lot of sunshine and hot weather. And of course, under the strong sunshine, and it's very, very hot. And these British people do not want to work themselves. Alright, so who did they use? Slaves coming from? Slaves mainly coming from? No. Local population almost died out at the very beginning of colonization. Colonies, no. Yeah. Africa. Yeah, it's kind of slave trade, right? the kind of triangle slave trade in the Atlantic. So that's how they sort of started sort of plantation business. But in the early 19th century, British people and European people thought like using slaves was morally unacceptable because using slave has a lot of difficult ethical problems, right? So they abolished slavery in 1930s. But then they have problems. Okay, now they don't use slaves anymore, but still they have to go church. So they need workers. And that's where India comes into the picture. India was, of course, the biggest British colony at that time. And so basically, they can't use slaves, but they had sort of contract with Indian workers. And these contracted workers went to Trinidad. But this contract was pretty tough, and a lot of people couldn't go back. And they had no choice but to stay. And that's why there was already a sizable Indian community in Trinidad, and that's where Selva's parents went. Okay, sorry to interrupt you. Move on to the education and learning.
In the 1940s, Salman attended Naparima College, a secondary school established by Canadian missionaries, where he developed an interest in literature. He then moved on and worked as a journalist with the Trinidad Guardian, a news company still active today. So in 1950, Salman boarded a ship to London, joining the Windrush generation. So this is around 300,000 Caribbean individuals who moved to the UK between the late 1940s and early 1970s to secure employment and help rebuild the country.
Okay, so we will come back to the this later in question series. But most of the migrants were workers, but there were writers who wanted to establish their reputation in the so-called the mother country. And Selvan was one of such writers. Okay, go on.
From 1956 to 1957, Salman became a central figure in the flourishing literary scene in London, even regularly participating in the BBC program Caribbean Voices. His first novel, A Brighter Sun, was praised for its portrayal of the lives of Indo-Trinidadian peasants, and he gained further recognition with The Lonely Londoners, which focused on characters of African descent, earning him the title of the father of Black writing in Britain.
Okay, so Selvan really sort of established his reputation with this work, The Lonely Londoners, a rather short novel. And this really made him a kind of father figure of Black British. Okay, go on.
But despite his success, Salvan struggled financially in London during the 1970s and 1980s. He says, "I could never write fast enough to keep up with basic expenses like rent and food." As the English economy worsened and local critics moved on from Caribbean writing, Salman and his wife, Althea, and this is his second wife. He actually had a first wife he married in the 1940s and had one kid with her, but I guess they got divorced. So him and his second wife and their 3 kids relocated to Calgary in Canada for pragmatic reasons, hoping for better educational opportunities for their children. Initially, he faced underemployment, securing only visiting positions at the University of Victoria Victoria before later finding stable work at the University of Calgary, first as a janitor and then as a writer in residence. After about 4 years, his professional situation finally improved, allowing him to take visiting positions at other universities and become an active member of the Literary Conference Center. He frequently received grants for his work and used them to fund his frequent visits to Trinidad, where he also went to attend conferences and also teach. So, from 1981 until his death in 1994, Salvan's contributions to literature, particularly his focus on the immigrant experience, left a lasting impact on Caribbean literature. He sadly passed away on April 16, 1994, from pneumonia during a visit to Trinidad at an airport on his way back home to Canada. People started a sort of myth by saying that the universe didn't want him to lay to rest anywhere other than his actual home. Even poetically, his colleague, Ismith Khan, reflected on his passing, saying, I am glad Sam returned to Trinidad. It would have been too lonely to be buried in England or Canada, both of which are far too cold for someone who loved the sun, loved his island, and loved his people. Posthumously, Salvan's work was and still is celebrated for its pioneering portrayal of the Caribbean diaspora, and he is regarded as a key figure in the development of post-colonial literature. But on the other hand, because Canada took too long to recognize his contributions, he became known as the shunned literary genius. And if you want to know more about his interesting life, you can go to this website called The Walrus. They write detailed accounts of a lot of writers' lives. And we will move on. Oh, are there any questions about the author?
Any questions? Yeah, so although he spent his later years in Canada, his reputation there was not too good because he already established his reputation in Britain. So I think Canadian literary community sort of didn't even probably even now doesn't know how to deal with him. But when it comes to Caribbean literature and Black British writing, he's really, really one of the founding figures. He's really, really. And why is he important? Or we will try to understand by tackling questions. Right? And let's go.
To underground introduction. The story follows Johnson, a quickly man from Trinidad, living in London. As he embarks on a job, it's like trying to secure a place to sleep with his new girlfriend, Pat, set in the lively streets of Bayswater. Johnson's persistent yet comical efforts to win over Pat are met with the rejection at every turn. Alongside his friends Davis and the narrative, Johnson's night unravels with a mix of superstition, humor, and culture. Identity showcasing both his discoloration and his bizarre sense of determination. And now I'm going to talk about the summary. And the main characters are Joseph, Jarvis, and Pat, and the narrator. The setting is in the late night London, Bayswater, and surrounding areas. The plot overview. Johnson, a man from Trinidad, spends the night dispiriting, trying to find a place to sleep with his new girlfriend, Pet, who resists his advances. Throughout the night, Joseph displays nervous, superstitious behavior, knocking on wood for luck and kissing the pumps. He repeatedly asks his friends Jarvis and the narrator if they think Pet will spend the night with him despite her clear refusals. After several failed attempts to secure a hotel room, Pat refuses to stay with Jobson, leaving him frustrated. Later, Jobson discovers Pat with his uncle, leading to another confrontation and his final plea for help from his friends.
Okay, as a summary, that's, but later, how late, how much time is there between D and E? I think my memory is correct. It's the section E takes place 1 week later. Yeah. So after here is a one night in London, and the last part takes place, I think, 1 week later.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
The key things: desperation and humor. Justin's relentless but comical attempts to manipulate the situation. And
What do you mean when you say manipulate the situation? When you say manipulate, although this is not a classical English, manipulate means to control someone with probably a little bit sort of bad intention. Okay, that's manipulate. What exactly do you want to say? Control the situation or deal with the situation?
he wants the girlfriend to sleep.
Okay. Okay.
And in the cultural identity, repeated references to being Indian together to gain sympathy. And the superstition and religious faith just sends frequent knocking on wood and kissing the cross as a way to cope with it.
Is it really religious faith? You said religious faith. Yeah. He often kisses his friends. But is this religious faith? Do you think he's a real kind of sincere Christian? Maybe. That's also I think we need to think about because definitely knocking on wood is rather kind of superstitious behavior where that indicates that he believes in some kind of superstition. Right?
Yes.
And superstition and religious faith, do they in most of the cases, do they sort of are they compatible? A little bit. Yeah, just a little bit. So I think his his sort of behavior of knocking off wood sort of raises question about how serious he is in his religiousness. And this is what we need to think about. Okay, so we need to think about it. Okay, right?
Hi, I'm Emily, and I'm going to answer the first question. So, let me identify which groups is wind rush. Like the wind rush derived from the ancient Empire wind rush ship, which brought one of the first largest group of Caribbean people to the UK in 1948, and people who in immigrated from Caribbean to British from 1948 to 1921 are called Windrush Group.
Windrush generation.
Windrush generation.
So Empire Windrush is the name of
The ship.
the name of the ship that brought Caribbean people from the Caribbean to Britain. And although this was actually not the very first ship that brought Caribbean people to Britain, somehow the name Empire Windrush really has a kind of symbolic significance. And now we talk about those people who migrated from the Caribbean to Britain around from when to when?
1948 to 1971.
Yeah, 1948 to, 1970 or a little bit earlier, 1960. That's they are called a Windrush generation. Okay, so let's talk about the background.
So the background is after World War II, many British workers had died in War, and there need to rebuild British. So they returned to their colonies across the world in the Caribbean. And at that time, the British Nationality Act in 1948 states that people who had a Commonwealth passport could live and work in Britain. It also means that Commonwealth citizens could travel with their Commonwealth passport without needing any extra documents to prove their right to live or work in Britain. Children could also travel on their parents' passport, so they don't need to have their own documents. So it's pretty easy for them to go to British, and I think the only reason why they're going to British is because to make more money, to earn more money for their families, and they're thinking if they earn enough money at British, they might can that their families to come to British to have a better life.
Okay, your explanation is very right. Okay, of course, in the Second World War, Britain was on the winning side or losing side?
I think it's the inside.
Yeah, winning. Of course, Britain won the World War II. Particularly at the beginning of the World War II, Germany heavily bombarded major British cities. And as you also mentioned, a lot of them died because of the war. So they needed more workers to rebuild the country. And they changed the law in order to make it easier for people from British colonies to migrate. So that, yeah, in order to help rebuilding the country, and that would give, from the Caribbean's viewpoint, that would give opportunities to make more money. Okay, so a lot of people migrated from the Caribbean, not only from Caribbean, but we just only focus on Caribbean today. And a lot of people sort of ended up migrating into Britain. And let's move on to the second one.
So at first that they think the life here, the life in Britain will be good, but actually not. That there are some racist violence and harassment happening there. Like for example, if they want to rent a house there, that they would be refused because of their because they are black people, and it's really hard for them to find a job at that time.
Or they can find the jobs, but the kind of jobs that British people do not want to do, right? So yeah, their life was pretty tough. So
Um, so so they changed the interpretation law a couple of times. But as I researched that, the biggest impact of these things and is because of the 1971 Immigration Act. And it changed to works permits were replaced with employment vouchers that were only given for a set period of time. This means that most immigrations that was allowed would be temporary, so they can stay there at stay there like the laws in 1948.
yeah, so a lot of people migrated to Britain, not only from Caribbean, but also from places like India, subcontinent, and some parts of Africa. And this really caused tension between white British and those migrants. And to put it very simply, as time went by, the law became tighter and tighter for immigrants. This was partly because by the time 1960s, yeah, 10 years, almost 10 years had passed, right? And the rebuilding of the society, the process is almost done. So they became, in some people's eyes, they became sort of redundant. And in the meantime, in the cultural scene, there are lots of conflicts and social insecurities. And as a result of that, immigration law became tighter. And that's one of the consequences of mixed generations. All right, then let's go.
So in 2017, that there have been rush scandals, which a lot of things happened that so at that time when they go to British, that they don't have office documents that they live in British. And after 1971, that some of the first generation of Windrush that are detained, deported, and denied to the British. And now the British are trying to fix this problems, but they didn't really fix it properly.
They haven't fixed the problem, and that's one of the kind of mess that this new Labour government somehow has to fix. Okay, the Windrush scandal happened as a consequences of this tightening or increasing tightening of immigration. And this continued even in the early 21st century. And particularly the previous Tory government targeted at so-called illegal migrants. So they said, okay, they said to British people, we would remove those illegal migrants, right? And this, so the real target of government policy at that time was recently arrived illegal migrants. But because British Home Office did a really poor job, they started to target on people of Windrush generation and their children. Because at that time, British nationality, under the British Nationality Act 1994 years, it was so easy to travel to Britain. And all they needed was just only passport. But when the law changed in the around early 2010s, they started to arrest Windrush generation, saying that you don't have proper documentation to prove that you actually belong to UK at that time. And they really did something horrible. They were legal citizens for so many years, but one day police came and said you are arrested because your stay in Britain was illegal. And so this tightening of immigration law, really the last sort of result was the Windrush scandal, and those who were the victims of this scandal, of course, asked for compensation, but very few people really got money. And a lot of people are done without proper compensation because they are getting older. But that was sort of more recent history, and we would talk about around this section. All right, so then let's move on to the various history line. Let's move on to question 1.
So for the question one, because I'm not a English speaker, so I'm not really sure about what is unusual language in English language in the story. But as I find that I think handle up is kind of weird in the sentence. So let me read the sentence in the story. The last time I see Joseph, he had a piece of broomstick handle up in the lining of his coat. So handle up is kind of weird in this sentence, I think.
No, this is okay part actually.
Really?
Yes. I think you got it wrong. It's the handle of broomstick. Oh, it's okay. But okay, and you